Welcome into Pallilo Points. I'm Brandon Stranger, Sports Map Houston. He is Charlie Pallilo of ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. And if you have not yet, please hit subscribe. We really do appreciate it. Charlie, let's talk some Astros. As we record this, the Astros are about 40% of the way through the season. They look good, but are challenged. And we've discussed it plenty of times on this channel. The bullpen, seems to be their primary weakness. As pointed out by Chandler Rome and Ken Rosenthal this week, the luxury tax could play a critical role for a couple of reasons. As it stands now, the Astros sit just under that $210 million threshold. Besides the monetary considerations, which would be considerable because they would be repeat tax offenders, it would impact the compensatory picks that they would get back for Correa and or Verlander. Now, normally, this is just the cost of being a good team, but we know the Astros are still paying the piper for sign stealing, so they do not have their first and second round picks this year. So compensatory picks become all of a sudden that much more important because you decrease their value if you exceed that luxury tax. So given all this context, Charlie, is it realistic to expect James Click to be able to make a trade that allows them to be competitive without mortgaging the future?
The usual proviso, it's always easier to spend someone else's money, but I don't think competitive balance tax implications really should impact the decision-making between now and the end of July. If there is a meaningful bullpen upgrade there to be made to take on a little bit of salary, if it nudges you over 210, I don't think the drop of 2 rounds in a compensatory pick from after the second round to after the fourth round, if that's your return for losing Correa in free agency, I would not be swayed from making an acquisition, and I think can help me now. I don't think that is mortgaging the future to any meaningful extent. I think you hit on the key variable off back-to-back seasons with no first or second round draft pick. They're probably clinging to every bit of potential draft capital that they can. I would think it's an incremental cost if you feel you're adding a real hammer for a setup role in your bullpen. They have maybe 6 weeks to judge their internal options. They've run through one wild or wildly ineffective guy after another. Andre Scrub in the minors. Enoli Paredes, no idea where he's throwing the ball. Joe Smith, just not very good. It doesn't look like any point in his career. So they've had guys come up with elbow soreness or shoulder soreness, which might just be a way to shuffle the roster, take a look at someone else. There's a variability season to season or even within season of non-premier relievers that there's the possibility of acquiring a guy who's been all right and for 2 months he's no good for you. Then you cost yourself 2 rounds of draft pick slotting. I just don't think that's a cost that should make you say, nope, not going to make the move. I don't even know if as an X factor at this point, the major bullet the Astros fired in the offseason for the bullpen, Baez from the Dodgers, 2 years, $12 million. Will he throw a pitch for them this season? There's no indication he's close, but if they think he can get healthy for August and September, that would dissuade them from wanting to take on additional salary.
Yeah, Baez's inability to play seems like the ultimate payback for the Astros fleecing them for Yordan, but that's another conversation. Do you think that maybe in this time in Houston sports, do you think it's a little easier to get Astros fans on the don't mortgage the future bandwagon, considering the state of both the Texans and the Rockets right now?
No, because the Astros are good now. The Rockets and Texans are dueling dumpster fires. So it's within reach. So it's not like it's a pipe dream that you're just setting up a flare for a relief pitcher and hoping for the best. Right? They have a good squad that's capable. So if it's for a non-everyday player, right, how many innings in 2 months would you get out of a setup reliever? So that's what the Astros have to weigh in terms of the draft pick cost, any actual finances. But to the tax itself, even if you go to a 33% penalty rate, if you're $4 million over the tax, that's $1.3 million, $1.4 million. The NBA, the floor for the luxury tax is dollar for dollar. So I think on this specific issue, while the Astros' overall payroll is top 5 in the major leagues, they've been 7th, 4th, and 2nd the last 3 years, so no one can accuse them of operating on the cheap. But on this particular issue, if, we don't want to go over that competitive balance tax by $1 million or $2 million because of the dollar and cents implications, I would find that weak. The draft pick argument you could go for, I would just choose to disagree with the decision if they said, nope, we're not trading because we don't want to pick after the 4th round as opposed to after the 2nd.
Well, let's say they don't make a move, and it's not because they're worried about either of those concerns. Maybe there's just not a deal to be had. So if they don't make a deal, they stay healthy, do the Astros have enough as is to make it to the World Series?
Yes, and that if you get into the tournament, you have a shot. We saw an absolutely mediocre Astros team last season, the short season, get hot for a couple of weeks and come within one game of going to the World Series. This roster, at least given the performance level of the players, is a better roster than what they had last year. I don't hold out any hope, by the way, of Justin Verlander being that wild card addition to the bullpen come late September. I mean, talk about found money if that were the case. All right, 5 teams make the playoffs in the league. 3 of them are in the playoffs. 2 are in the wild card, where you're 50-50 basically to be eliminated right off the top, and then you have to win 2 more series after that. So if you have a 10% chance to win the World Series, that's really good. And if you're not totally selling out, paying $1.40 to get a $1 acquisition for the short term, the case is to be made is to go for it, unless you're really setting back your future with the move. And I don't think they would be at the levels that we're talking about. But there is the challenge in what the Astros weigh, and they're a smartly run front office. If it's the best setup reliever on the market is available, well, then you'd consider that market to probably be vibrant. Well, the Astros farm system's not good. So if you don't have the farm system equity to bid for the best player on the market, you need to be willing to take on more salary, a team that's looking to maybe dump some salary in addition to acquire prospects. Well, the more cash you're willing to absorb in the deal, or maybe even send some the other way, maybe the lower you can get away with in terms of prospect capital that you have to give up. So do the Astros make a trade? Push comes to shove by July 31st that we're thinking, that's a real difference-making trade. My guess would be no, but it's James Click's first time really in the saddle at a trade deadline, so we can just hurry up and wait. Old Amish expression.
So how much pressure is James Click under? Because he is following a guy like Jeff Luhnow, who was known to make those big splashy moves. If they don't make a big splashy move, do the fans get a little restless?
Naturally, I don't think Click faces any job pressure that you sat idly or were too conservative and I want a new general manager. If you're Jim Crane, right? Click's still very early in the tenure, the first full season. I wouldn't say ironically is the right word, but Dusty Baker's the guy whose future could ride on this, because I think if the Astros are not back in at least the American League Championship Series, they probably have a new field manager come 2022. But in terms of internal expectations, and the Astros are aware, just look at the parade of players that have left over the last 3 years. And this offseason, we may well be adding Correa, Verlander, unique circumstance, but Zach Greinke. So the Astros' elite talent base, if it's continuing to erode, well, you want to maximize your opportunities while you still have as much of that talent here as possible. And that time is now. But it doesn't mean that you do something that is just silly, that 3, 5, 7 years from now, you're saying, what were we thinking? We kind of look desperate with that move we made in 2021. I think it's tough to make a trade bad enough for a setup reliever where you'd give up the next Jeff Bagwell to get Larry Anderson for a couple of months, or Yordan Alvarez to get Josh Fields for a couple of months, as the Dodgers did a few years ago. But you're aware that these things happen, so you might be a little skittish in stepping out to make a deal like that now.